Right, let's have a look at this. So let's take a look at advertising first, because most people believe that that's where the life cycle or the life cycle of a sale starts, is with their advertising. They feel that they put an ad out, and once they put the ad out, the work should come flooding in. And some people have a lot of misconceptions about this. Some people believe that the very simple act of saying in a magazine, on a leaflet, on a billboard at a golf club, where else do you guys advertise? Some people believe that by just the very nature of putting that ad up, then it should work. And then they get extremely frustrated when it doesn't. They go, wow, okay, well, advertising on Facebook doesn't work, but doing Google ads doesn't work. Advertising in a community magazine doesn't work, because they haven't really set the scene. Now, first and foremost, before you advertise anything, and I'm going to do a very brief overview on this, but before you advertise anything, you need a number of things in place. And these are the things I was alluding to earlier when I said about positioning. It's sort of the second stage in being a successful local business. And that is about positioning yourself. And that involves making sure that when anybody hears about you, looks you up, is introduced to your business, that they can actually go and find out something about who this guy is, who this business is, what are these people all about. So in the main, that in essence involves a lot of online presence. So my question to you is, before you run any adverts at all, what's your online presence like? Do you have a website? And by the way, I am in no way suggesting that you need to spend a fortune on any of these things. Most of what we talk about in the toolbox is low and no cost anyway. Okay, you can have a nice looking website for very, very little. Our members in the toolbox, we give them to them for free. That's how easy it is to get a website. But even if you're not a toolboxer and you have something like a GoDaddy or a Wix or whatever, you can have a nice website for very little. The problem is, people, number one, don't put a lot of thought into how they put their website together. Some people avoid putting a website together at all because they just, number one, they think they have to spend a fortune on it, or they're not sure what they need to put on it. And the truth of it is, it's like having a shop front. You just need a bit of real estate so that when somebody comes to check you out, they can find you and they know that you actually exist. You will be amazed, and it happens, the number of times somebody will come across a Google ad or whatever and discover that, yeah, this guy might be near me. I want to use this service, or I'm going to call this electrician. And then they'll go and they'll double check to see if you exist. And if you don't have a website, it starts setting off alarm bells in their head. It's like, well, if he hasn't got a website, is he really a legitimate business? What's he doing? And I know that a lot of these things are crazy. It's a little bit like why some people won't phone a mobile number. It's a little bit crazy in this day and age, but it's a fact. There are people who do it. So you've got to make sure that before you spend a penny on advertising, what are you advertising? What are you promoting? Because it's not just about coming in, somebody picking up the phone and working with you. People will want to check you out. So is your Google My Business presence right? I don't even think they're calling it that these days. But is that right? Is that all up to date? Is that all looking good and looking sharp and looking the part for you? Do you have a decent website? And I say decent, that doesn't mean you've got to spend £600, £800, £1,000 on it. It means that you just have a respectable looking one. Do you have a decent looking Facebook business page? Not a Facebook profile where you talk to all your mates and your friends and you do all your funny bits and pieces on, but a business page. Do you have that? Do you have a LinkedIn profile? So what have you got out there online, and is it looking professional? And that all comes way before you spend a penny on advertising, because otherwise you can go out and spend a fortune on advertising. And, let's say 1,000 people, I'm just pulling figures out of the air. Let's say 1,000 people see your ad, right? One person might just take the chance and pick up the phone and go, yeah, I need an electrician. But I guarantee you, the huge percentage of the people will go, let's have a look and see who this guy is. Let's see, I've got his leaflet, or I've got his advert, or I've seen this, but let's have a look and see who he is. And if they can't find who you are, then they're not likely to contact you. So that's one area where things can break down. Then you've got to take a look at the actual advert itself. So when you put out an advertisement, any kind of advertisement, it needs to be targeted. And the problem with many people is they don't target their advertising, they generalize. They chuck out an advert that they hope everybody's going to read and everybody's going to respond to. And the unfortunate thing is that doesn't happen. You know, not everybody is your customer, number one. And number two, even if they were, there's no way you have the budget to target everybody. So what you're better off doing is narrowing down what we call in the toolbox our ideal customer, and making sure that your promotions, your advertisements, your marketing is all targeted towards that ideal customer. I'm not going to start teaching ideal customer now. We do a little bit of that during the challenges that I run, the free challenges that I run. We do a lot more of that inside the toolbox, a lot more in depth inside the toolbox. But you need to make sure that you're targeting the right kind of audience for your business. Otherwise, you're spending money on advert. Well, let's put it this way. Let's go back and say I'm spending £100 to advertise. So if I spend £100 to advertise and my advert gets shown to 5 million people, that £100 is not going to go a long way, because these millions of people are going to see the advert, and out of that, I might be lucky if one of the people who I want to work with, who is my ideal customer, may possibly spot that. Okay, so now what about if I've identified my ideal customer, I've been able to narrow that, I've been able to target that, and now I spend my £100 and it's only going out to 5,000 people. So now my £100 is going to it's being used to show my advert to 5,000 people. 5,000 people, the majority of those are more likely to see my advert than the millions of people that we talked about earlier. Hopefully this is making sense. So by targeting, by understanding who your ideal customer is, and by using methods to target those people, you get a better return on your investment, therefore increasing your opportunity to convert. Making sure that you use the right kind of language for those customers. Again, many tradesmen tend to use standard industry language that doesn't resonate with their customer. When you're dealing with your customer, you've got to look at how, what are the issues that they have, and how do they refer to those issues. So make sure you're using the right kind of language that speaks to them. The next thing is then the solution that you offer. What is the solution that you offer that another electrician doesn't offer? And it could be something really, really silly. One of the little things that we use in terms of picking up smaller works for domestic works and so on and so forth is there's terminology that we would use in a promotion that would go, I'm paraphrasing now, somewhere along the lines of, we'll guarantee that we'll show up. Now that's a solution for people who are fed up with tradesmen who don't show up. So if you're saying in your promotion, in your advert, I guarantee I'm going to show up, then that's less of a risk for the customer to call you as opposed to calling somebody who's not saying that in their promotion and their advert. Because most customers, and I think there was a large thread about this in one of the online groups the last couple of days, but most customers have an issue with calling a tradesman, then being told, yeah, I'll be around on Wednesday at 4 o'clock. And the guy never doesn't show, doesn't make a phone call, doesn't do anything. That's a big downer for them. So make sure you're providing a solution. And the solution doesn't necessarily always mean the thing that they want. So in other words, they want extra sockets, or they want to have a house rewired. That's not the solution we're talking about. The solution we're talking about goes a little bit deeper than that. What is it that concerns them about using a tradesman that you can respond to, that you do differently to other people? Having a call to action. Now I put down here having the right call to action, but the bottom line is, how many times have you seen an advert or a promotion that has absolutely no call to action at all? I see it time and time and time again. You see people advertising on Facebook. You see people putting adverts in magazines, leaflet drops going out, and there's no call to action. They just literally tell people how great they are, and they put a phone number on it and hope that somebody's going to phone. And they don't tell people what they want them to do. So understanding what a call to action is, number one, and making sure that there is a call to action, but then understanding who your ideal customer is and making sure that that call to action is right to them, so that you're appealing to them to ensure that they actually make the call. And then the other thing, as far as the advert itself is concerned, is making sure that you've actually got some clear and concise contact details on it. And I know you're looking at the screen now and you're saying, James, that's fucking obvious. Yeah, it is obvious, but it's amazing how sometimes common sense is not common practice, that people make it difficult. They'll put an advert onto Facebook and then they'll expect people to go and visit their Facebook page to find their about details, to find the phone number so that they can call them. And they think that people are going to jump through those hoops. They're not. If you want people to call you, if you're working in the service sector and you want people to call you, then your phone number should be all over everything. If you're sending out a leaflet, it should be front and back of the leaflet. Don't assume that the customer will turn over the back. That's a bad assumption to make. Okay, you would think it would be obvious. Don't assume that they will. You want to have your contact details front and back. That's if you're doing a leaflet. If you're doing a magazine ad, you want to make sure that that number is big and bold and as visible as possible on that ad. It should be the biggest thing on the ad is the contact details. If you have a website, your phone number should be top and on the right hand side of that website on every single page that they go to. If you've got a Facebook page, same thing, your phone number, regardless of the fact that they can push a button and call you from their phone and all that. Don't assume that they will do it. Don't assume that people automatically go, oh, there's a button there, I can press that, and if I'm on my phone, I can get it. Have the number displayed, and it should be on the banner, again, on the top right-hand side. We're going into probably too much detail, but clear contact details. So these are a number of different areas where the conversions can be affected as far as just the advert is concerned. So we talked about before the advert, making sure the positioning was right. We've talked about the advert, and these are only some of the areas where things can fall down. That, could you now possibly, based on just the advert, go back and look at those, 2, 4, 5 points and say, right, am I targeting the right audience? Am I using the right language for that audience? Am I offering a clear solution for what it is that they want? Do I actually have a call to action? If I do, is it the right call to action? And are my contact details clear and visible so that when they attempt to call me, they don't have to jump through hoops. It's easy for them to do. Could you look at any of your adverts that are out there at the moment, any of the promotions that you're doing out there at the moment? Whether it is a paid for advert in a magazine, a leaflet drop, whether it's your website, whether it's your Facebook page, whether it's a banner in a golf club or a tennis club, whatever it might be, could you go back and look at any of your adverts, any of your promotions that are not working, make any one of these or all of these tweaks and make it actually work for you and make it convert better? And I can guarantee you that for some of you, that will be the case. For some of you, we could go back over some of your marketing material, look at it and go, you know what, if you adjust this, 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 and this, you'll get conversions. You'll get more. But that at this stage, that conversion from an advert now only moves you on to an inquiry. You see? So that doesn't guarantee you the work. That only moves you to an inquiry. You can still fuck it up after this. Okay, so once you've got the inquiry, you're now into your what we call your sales process, aren't we? So somebody now, the advert has converted. Can you see how many different places it can break down? The advert now converts. The person picks up the phone and they call to discuss their problem, their job, their issue with you. How can you mess it up from here? You think you've got it in the bag. Not necessarily. So what are your sales process like? So call answering. How is your call answering being handled? Most people, if the phone rings sort of more than 5 times, they're gone for a lot of people. But for a lot of tradesmen, unfortunately, they let the phone ring out and it'll go to answer service. I'll tell you now, at least 85% of people will not leave a message. They'll, unless there's somebody who've worked with you previously, know you and want you back, a lot of people, 85% of people, will not leave a message when they're looking for a service provider. What they will do is they'll go back down to the list and they'll go to the next person on it and they'll phone them. Don't tell me I'm wrong, because you've done it yourself. Be honest with yourself. Actually type in the box, have you done that yourself? You get impatient. You think, oh, sod it, he's not answering, I'm going to call somebody else. And particularly if it's an emergency, particularly if it's something you want done in a hurry. So call answering, is your call answering being done properly? And if you're clambering around, if you're answering your own phone and you're clambering around in a loft, or you got your head underneath somebody's floorboards, or whatever the case is, you're chasing out a wall, and your phone is going to answering service, how many opportunities to do business are you missing out on? How many conversions are you losing because of that? So get in place some form of a call answering, whether that is a VA that simply answers the phone as your business, whether that is a member of your family, a member of staff, whatever it is. Have somebody who actually answers your phone during business hours. I'm not necessarily saying that this has to be outside of business hours, but during business hours, have somebody who answers your phone. Because even if somebody answers the phone and they get told, sorry, he's out on site at the moment, I'll have him call you back as soon as he's free, you've now got them in a holding pattern. They're more likely to hold off because of that rather than go looking and shopping elsewhere, right? How many times have you go back to your phone after you've clambered down out of a loft, you've picked up the phone, you've seen 2 missed calls or whatever it is, you've dialed back and you call and say, and they respond and they say, sorry, it's all right, I've already got somebody. Yeah, it happens. Whereas if you've got somebody answering the phone for you, whether it is a member of staff, whether it is a VA, you've got somebody answering the phone for you, they're more likely to go, right, he said he's going to call back, so he will. Now you clamber down out of the loft and you've got a message from your VA saying, call back Mrs. Smith. So you call back Mrs. Smith and say, really sorry about that. I was out on site. What can I help you with? Much better. Much better. So we can screw things up on the call answering part of things. But, there's even more behind that as well, because the way you answer the phone, how you deal with the customer when you answer the phone, how you come across on the phone, all of this can affect your conversions. It can affect how the interaction with the customer goes later. All right. Then there's the quotation. What's your process for getting your quote out? So now you've spoken to Mrs. Smith. She's, booked you in to come and do a quote. What's the process for that? Do you arrange a date? Do you go out? Do you quote over the phone? How do you handle all of that? And do you do that consistently? Do you actually complete that process? Again, how many times have you had a customer say to you, well, I've had 3 guys out. They've all said they're going to send me a quote and nobody's returned it. Nobody sent me back a quote. Are you going to send one? Will you send me one? And if you do, you're more likely to get the work, aren't you? So there's number 1, what's the process for doing it? Number 2, are you actually following through and doing it? And then number 3, when you deliver the quote, how's it being delivered? How is it delivered? Are you doing it by email? Are you doing it by snail mail? Are you doing both? How is it presented? Is it well laid out? Does it look good? How do you break things down? And I'm not going to say what's right or wrong. We all have our own ideas about that. But how does it appear to the customer when they look at it? Does it look like it's professional? Does it look like it's considered? Does it look like it's been thought about? That can affect it as well. Because you know what? If you go in with a scrap of paper and say, yeah, it's going to be 500 quid, there you go. And the next guy comes behind you and everything else is equal, but he's got a nice letter-headed paper laid out properly with his terms and conditions on it and so on and so forth, explains to the customer how they'll pay the deposit, how they pay the balance and so on and so forth. They're more likely to get the work. Why? Because it looks more professional, it looks more considered. Okay? So quotation, they can be a breakdown part of why we don't get conversions. Paperwork, I've sort of alluded to that in terms of any kind of paperwork that leaves your office. Is it branded properly? Does it look proper? Is it clean? Or are you one of these guys who just tears out a sheet from a receipt book and writes down on a scrap of paper? So all of these things can affect the conversions. The follow-up, again, time and time again, I've had guys, spoken to guys who will present a quote. They'll do all the work. They'll send out the quote. And then they wait to hear back from the customer, right? They wait to hear back from the customer. And then a week goes by, they haven't heard back from the customer. 2 weeks go by, they haven't heard back from the customer. 3 weeks go by and they're thinking to themselves, I better phone this guy because I haven't heard anything back, or I better see what's going on because I want to start getting more work into my diary. And that's when you start thinking about all those quotes that go out. It's when your diary starts getting empty, isn't it? That's when you start thinking about it. The diary's getting empty, and then you go, oh, should I go just phone these people that I sent all these quotes to? It's too late, because then you get back on the phone and you say, hey, Mr. Smith, I sent you a quote 5 weeks ago, and you didn't come back to me. And he said, well, you didn't come back to me, so I thought you weren't interested. I've got somebody else to do it. Right? There's a lot of occasions where you could actually be the higher figure. But the very fact that you actually make a phone call or you do a follow-up email or you follow up in some way, shape or form means that you'll actually win the work. So make sure that every single quote you send out, you follow up. And, the follow-up should start straight away. So, you send out the quote. the next thing you should do is pick up the phone and say, I've just sent you a quote, whether it's by snail mail or whether it's by email. I've just sent you a quote. It should be in your inbox now, or you should get it in the mail in the next couple of days. Let me know when you've got it. Not necessarily when you've read it, not necessarily when you've made a decision. Let me know when you've got it. Why am I asking that? Why am I doing that? I want to keep communication open between us. I want this guy, this person that I'm quoting for, this person I'm hoping is going to give me his business. I want to keep rapport with him. I want to keep communication with him so that he's going to choose me over anybody else. I want him to see that I actually give a shit about his project. Okay? So follow up. And don't just leave it at that first phone call. Within the toolbox, we have a process of follow-up emails that we talk about. We use a particular type of tool. I'm not going to go into it now, but the object is that once you do the quote for the customer, their details go into a follow-up sequence. Now you can sit back. You don't have to remember to make that call if that's an issue. If you're a one-man band and you're busy out working, you don't have to remember to make that call. Why? Because your autoresponder sequence, your email sequence will do the follow-up for you every couple of days until that person responds and comes back to you and says, yes, I want to go ahead, or no, I don't want to go ahead. Whatever the case is, they'll receive an email every couple of days just to say, hi, just wondered if you had an opportunity to have a look at the quote. I'm paraphrasing. There are ways to word these. There's samples and templates in the toolbox for doing that. But it is hugely important for that follow-up because, as I said, in some cases, even though you'll be the most expensive quote or the middle quote, whichever, even though the fact that you do the follow-up will get you to work because they believe you give a shit, you care about their project, and it's not just another job to you. So making sure that you do some follow-up. Communication with customers, I alluded to that when I said, why am I doing that? I'm keeping communication going. I want to keep communication going with the customer because that builds rapport. We know that people will buy from people that they know, like, and trust. The more communication, the more time you spend talking to a customer about anything helps you to build rapport with them. That rapport gets you inside of their psyche. It gets you to own a little bit of space inside of their head, as opposed to the guy who just shows up with his notebook, writes down a few details, goes away, sends over a quote. That's it. That's the end of it. There's no relationship there. By you calling, by you communicating, by you sending out email and talking to the customer and saying, is there anything that you need to discuss with this? Is there anything that you want me to walk you through? Have you considered X, Y, Z? While you're doing that, you're building a relationship with that customer. You're building rapport with that customer. They're more likely then to choose you over somebody else. Another area where conversions can break down. Guys, is this of value to you? Let me see some thumbs, hearts, and smiley faces. Just smash on those thumbs, hearts, and smiley faces if this is of value. I need to take a sip of my my water. I'm going a little bit dry. And then I'm going to have a look at your comments. If you have any comments or questions, guys, please do post them in now. Would appreciate that. Richard Taunton said mastermind as well. Okay, Richard, cool. Jack Clargo, question. Right, okay, Jack, let's have a look. Question. When reading your book and reading about free advertising, it had me thinking, has anyone had success or taught about sticking boards on lampposts, etc.? I used to see a lot of adverts on lampposts growing up as a kid. A simple answer to that, Jack, is yes and no. And there is a strategy that we talked about in the toolbox about using signboards. Okay. Now I don't want to go into all of the details here because it's just not enough time and we're talking about conversions, but there is a strategy for using signboards. There's a lot of restrictions in terms of what you can anchor those boards to because of local authorities. And now, what didn't happen years ago, but does happen now with local authorities charging you for littering, charging you for advertising on their property and so on and so forth. So lampposts and things that are owned by the local authority. But there are strategies and there are ways to do it. There's a method, as I said, that it's a little while since we did it. It's a good opportunity for me to think about for one of the training days, actually, to revamp that and bring that back up again. But there is a way to do what you're talking about. Don't do it the way you're thinking, as in what you used to see was the ads cable tied to lampposts or telegraph poles, that type of thing. Don't do that. But there is a strategy, and we can dig that back out of the toolbox again and warm that up for you guys. but I like your thinking. I like your thinking. Um, Excellent. So, Jeff Jeff Longley, hashtag phone. Phone calls, 25% of calls to an electrician will go unanswered. Yeah, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all. And this again is, it's pertinent why having somebody to answer your phone for the sake of paying a VA. Now, a VA, virtual assistant, for those of you who need to know, but a VA can do a whole range of things. And there are good VAs and bad VAs. And a little bit like a lot of things when you're outsourcing them, we talk about outsourcing quite a bit inside the toolbox for various different things. But a VA, like many of these things, you could kiss a few frogs before you actually find a good one. There are a wide range of different types of virtual assistants out there. But, at its very simplest, at their very, very simplest, they will answer the phone for you, take a phone number and a name, send you the details, and then you make the call back. And then at the wider end of the spectrum, they will actually book things in. They'll book appointments in. They'll do your diary for you. They'll take deposits. They'll organize work, and so on and so forth. So there's a wide range. And for anybody starting out, for a couple of quid, and that's all it really costs, not a whole lot of money on a monthly basis to have somebody just answering the calls. And then as your business develops, then you could scale up with a VA and have them do a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And it's a really good way of growing a business. But you don't need to look at, when some people look at, I can't get anybody to answer my phone because it's going to cost me a fortune. You're talking to the wrong people. And what you're talking to then is a virtual assistant company who wants to do everything and doesn't want to just answer the phone. But there's lots of them out there. There's a huge amount of them out there who will literally start with small packages, just answering the phone, X number of calls a month, and it will really shift your business. And then there are other organizations. There's one that we work with closely in the toolbox, a chap called Dan McAdam from Rewired, and you can look him up if you want. But they actually answer the phone, book in the quote, they'll write up the quote for you, they'll follow up the quote for you, and so on and so forth. So it goes through the whole process of the back office stuff for you. So, and all you're doing is the physical stuff, like the actual going out and visiting for the quote and the actual doing of the work. So you can get VAs at every, all ends of the spectrum. Yeah, cool. Right. Okay. Let's have a look at the next part. You would think that was it as far as conversions are concerned, wouldn't you? But by now you think you've done the quote. Sorry, you've done the advertising. You've done all the pre-work. You've done the sales system, and you've got process, and you've got the work. But believe it or not, you can screw things up after you've actually got the work as well. Because once they say, go ahead and do the work for us, what do you have? All you have at that point is a customer. What you want to have is an evangelist. You want somebody who's going to come back to you time and time again. You want somebody who's going to refer you. You want somebody who's going to give you a testimonial, a referral. You want somebody who is ecstatic with what you do. So, of course, that's another area where your conversions can break down. Your repeat business. Okay, so once you've got the work booked in, there's a whole range of things that you need to consider as well. Again, communication, hugely, hugely, hugely important. While you are working on somebody's project, are you the type of person who just gets your head down and gets on with the job, and then at the end of the job collects a check and off you go? Are you the kind of person who's had issues previously? Think about what I'm about to say, because somebody's having these problems, and there's 23 of you guys out there at the moment watching this across the 3 different platforms. So the odds are some of you have had this issue. When have you finished up a job and you've turned to the customer and said, well, that'll be an additional 400 quid, or that'll be an additional whatever it might be, and the customer's looked at you like you've got 2 heads and said, but I only asked you if you could do it. I only asked you, while you were here. I didn't realize you were going to charge me extra. How many of you have had that kind of stuff? Come on. The odds are, I'd say 50% of you have had some form of that over the course of the time while you've been working. Communication, guys, can solve that kind of stuff. What you got to remember is when you get to that stage, when you get to the point where you've ended the project and now you're debating with the customer about extras, you've now lost the opportunity to have an evangelist. You've lost the opportunity to have a customer who's going to talk about you in a good way. Because now they're looking at you with suspicion. Now they're looking at you with issues. Now they're looking at you as somebody who's tried to pull the wool over their eyes. When you haven't done, you've not done any of that. But because communication hasn't been right, and how does that work? Well, as soon as something props up, as in the customer says, James, while you're here, could you replace that light fitting in the garage as well? Right? How often you turn around and you go, yeah, okay, I'll do that. Now in your head, you're counting up, that's another, let's say minimum charge job. That's another 65 quid, let's say, yeah? And you're clocking that up. Well, all the customer heard was you saying, yeah, I'll do that. And they're thinking, oh, possibly maybe it's the same as, built in with what he's doing anyway, because he's here. He's here anyway. But how many of you actually take time to stop and say to the customer, yeah, absolutely, I'm more than happy to do that, but you appreciate there'll be an additional charge of. That would alleviate all the problems at the end. Why does it alleviate? Because it creates an element of respect. You have told the customer what the position is there and then. They now have a choice. They can make a decision, and they can say, oh, at that rate, you know what, leave it. I'll do it myself at the weekend, or or they have the opportunity to go, yeah, okay, mate, that's no problem. Go ahead and do it at that. Or they could argue the toss and say, is there anything you could do? Could you do it a little bit less? Whatever. But at least they're aware of the situation. They know what's coming. So if you then go ahead and do the project, if you go ahead and do that little bit of extra work, there's no argument. You've still got a friend at the end of the scenario. That's only one element of communication. There are other things as far as communication is concerned. And this can come down to this next point as well, timings and stuff. So you say you're going to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Do you turn up at 8 o'clock in the morning, or do you wander in at 10:30 in the morning because you had a lot of stuff to do? Not that you weren't sitting on your backside doing nothing. You went down to wholesalers. They didn't have the materials that you needed, so you went off to a different wholesaler. They didn't have what you had, so you had to go to the next town. Then you had to come back. You got stuck in traffic. You know all of that. Your customer's sitting in twiddling their thumbs saying, he said fucking 8 o'clock. Another tradesman. Look at this. What would it have taken for you to pick up the phone and say to the customer, look, I've arrived at the wholesalers this morning. They haven't got that. I'm going to have to go elsewhere. I'll keep you informed of where I'm at, right? Or I'll text you, or I'll message you, or whatever. Now they know. Now, in your head, you haven't done any harm. You've gone and you've done everything you had to do. You've driven up to the job. You've offloaded your gear, and the customer's freaking fuming because you were supposed to be there at 8:30, and now you're rocking in at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. The damage is done. Now all you've got is excuses. Now all you've got is, oh, well, I had to go because I had to do this because they didn't have that, and they didn't. You could have kept them informed. So it's about communication. Be there when you're supposed to be there. If you're not going to be there, communicate with them and let them know. Quality control. Are you on top of the work that you're doing? If and when you do something that's not quite right, do you inform the customer? If you crack a piece of plaster on the living room wall because you were chasing on the other side, do you inform them and let them know this is the situation? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're at fault. It simply means that you are being responsible in the sense that, yeah, we're chasing out a wall, and things can happen. And unfortunately, in this instance, it did happen. Now, the customer may have to swallow that up. You may be good enough to say, we'll cover that. But whatever the situation is, instead of you leaving the project and the customer then discovering it and going, oh, look what you fucking did. Look what happened here. Yeah. It's simple things, very, very simple things can have a huge impact. And 9 times out of 10, the customers will be more than happy and more than accommodating if the communication is right. If you are talking to them, if you are respecting their property and them. So I've got here property and peeps. Couldn't fit people all on one line. So property and peeps. So if you're respecting their property and them, then they're more likely to be to build that rapport, to build that relationship, to pass your details on. Again, how many times or how many different options or places can this break down to an extent that they'll go, I'd never fucking recommend him. Yeah. Or where they just can't be, they're nonchalant about it. They just can't be asked. Whereas if you're on top of all of these, and this 9 times out of 10 comes down to communication with all of these ones below communication here, a lot of it comes down to just being able to, because things will go wrong. 9 times out of 10, something can always go wrong. But are you able to communicate to the customer and not try and hide from it and not try and run from it and front things up so that the customer knows and trusts you to do the right thing? whether it is with the timings, whether it's with quality control, and whether it's respect for their property. Again, paperwork, follow-up paperwork after a project. Are you making sure that they're getting their invoices on time? Are you making sure they're getting the certification on time? Anything else that they require once the job is completed? Are you making sure that that's all going out properly and it all looks the part as well? And then you would think it's all over at that point. And then it's follow up, and if I didn't mention it before, follow up. And what do we mean by that? Again, 9 times out of 10, most tradesmen have this transactional relationship with their customers, whereby they go in, do the work, end of the work, they get the check in this day and age, showing my age, they get the payment, and that's it. That's the end of the relationship. That's what we call a transactional relationship. But after the job is your opportunity to make an evangelist. After the job is your opportunity to get a customer who is likely to give you a testimonial, refer you to their friends, talk highly about you. And there's a lot of different, within the toolbox, we have various different strategies for following up, whether it's on the autoresponder, whether it's sending thank you cards, whether it's putting them on a mailing list, whether it's sending them out a newsletter. There's a number of different ways that you can follow up and keep your name on the tip of their tongue, on the tip of the customer's tongue, but show them that you care. And that's going to help you then with your conversions for your after work, whether it's referrals, whether it's getting more work, even whether it's getting testimonials from them as well. Right. Okay. That's the end of the content, guys. I know I've sort of glanced over it, but we're only supposed to have an hour. I've just gone over on that, and I do apologize. But that's the content. There's so much more in depth. Each one of these areas, each one of these sections, you could go down to into so much more detail. So if you do have any questions, now is your opportunity. Go ahead and ask me any questions that you want to ask. I'll happily stick around and answer any questions that you may have. While you're doing that, what I want to do is, for those of you who are not yet toolboxers, I just want to very quickly go over what the toolbox is all about. We are a community of electricians and other trades, primarily electricians, but other trades as well. We've got gas fitters, we've got heating engineers, alarm engineers, gardeners, plumbers, and so on and so forth in there as well. It's a training community helping people to grow their business. You get 24/7 access to the training portal, which has well over 500 training videos and other resources in there as well. We do weekly live online training events and Q&A events. There are some tried and tested templates that you can use, whether it's for leaflets, letters, you name it, magazine ads, letters to wholesalers, letters to homeowners, you name it. There's all sorts of various different templates that you can use for your business inside. You get, as a member, a free website and free email address, and we host that for you for the length of your membership. It is a private community, so the Facebook group is a private community of like-minded people. It's one of the safest communities on the web, I can guarantee you that. One of the most supportive communities on the web as well. Everybody in there has one thing in mind, that's growing their business and helping you to grow your business. There's no such thing in that group as a daft question. Nobody slates anybody else. They all, there will be critique, and yes, there will be differences of opinion, but it's all done in a positive way to help drive your business forward, all of it. And everybody's at different levels. We have people in there that are one-man bands. We got people in there who have 9 and 10 staff as well. So there's a hell of a lot of material inside it. If you're interested in getting involved, you can do so. You can either email me, james@jdewane.com, or you can go to jdewane.com/toolbox. There's a website up there at the moment that has been changed. The URL will be the same, but the new website will be going up very, very shortly over the next couple of days. We work strictly to a 6-step system, which is called the S.P.A.R.K.S Blueprint. I'll pop that up on screen for you so you know what we were looking at. My belief is that there are 6 key areas that if you pay attention to these 6 areas in your business, you cannot fail to have a successful business. And those areas are understanding how to specialize and not just generalize for what you do, positioning yourself within your local community to be the go-to electrician in your area, creating awareness about what it is you actually do to your ideal customer within your local area. That's all about advertising and breaking the local advertising code. How to build relationships quickly with people so that they will know, like, and trust you, and therefore use your services. Communication is all about keeping in touch. And then we look at how you can systemize it all so that you're not spending your life running your business. Again, many of us got into our own business so that we would have more money, more time, more freedom. And what we end up with is having a lot of time chasing money, so we get less money. We have less time because we're working all hours that God sends, and we don't have any kind of freedom because we're being pulled from pillar to post by builders and property developers and estate agents and so on and so forth. And that way we don't have control of our own business. Following these 6 steps, using the toolbox way, you actually learn to take control of your business. You get your life back, you get your time back, you earn properly. So if you're interested, then please do either email me or visit jdewane.com/toolbox.